I'm Cody Horton with Diverse Recruiting Experts. I'm really thrilled to have Ben Hasan with us here today to share some great information on lessons learned from building a sustainable D&I program. Ben, I want to thank you for joining us. I know you've got a busy schedule, and I appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule to share your insights and lessons learned at Walmart. I also think you've got a great background as a technology leader and will provide a unique perspective to our audience today. So let's start by learning a little bit about Ben Hasan. Can you tell me about your background and what led you to the current role as Walmart's Chief Culture, Diversity, and Inclusion Officer?
Yeah, Cody, thanks. And thanks for having me, and appreciate the invitation and participate. Sometimes I wake up in the morning and ask myself the same question. I was like, how did I end up in this gig? A little bit about me. I'm an inner city kid. I grew up in North Philadelphia, played a little basketball, dropped out of college a couple times, and, finally said, hey, you know what? I need to go back to school. So I got really lucky early in my career. Early in school, and I took a computer science class, and I actually fell in love with it. So my undergraduate degree is from Temple University. It was in a business school, but it was like hardcore programming. It was the same stuff that folks take in the engineering schools today. So I have a computer science undergraduate degree. Left Philly, moved to Texas. I worked for a company called EDS for a couple of years. I worked for a local gas company in Dallas for about 15 years. Got a phone call about a job at a startup company called Dell Computers. It was a $6 billion company when I joined them in '97. And I spent 11 really cool years at Dell. Got to travel the world. Been to India 42 times, Taipei, Singapore, all over Asia. We were actually beginning to develop product internationally. And so I had small teams that helped support that work. Got another interesting phone call about the job at Fortune 5 is what they told me in Fayetteville, Arkansas. And I was like, okay, there's no Fortune 5 in Fayetteville. This has got to be Walmart. And 13 years ago almost, I took a job working at Walmart, all in tech this whole time. And I spent the first 7 years in tech jobs here, started as a vice president, got promoted to SVP 3 years in. And I was in my dream job, Cody. A 900 person team, 3 different countries, $1.5 billion budget, reporting to the chief information officer. And I get this weird phone call. Hey, you're one of 5 finalists for the chief diversity officer job, about 6 years ago. I'm like, how am I a finalist for a job I didn't apply for? And, long story short, I go in and talk to the head of HR at the time. And she said, hey, here's all the reasons you should take the job. I'm still trying to get out of it. And then I go and talk to the CEO, and I'm like, Doug, I didn't even apply for this job. How am I actually the finalist for something I didn't apply for? I think back over my career, and I was doing a lot of mentoring. I have been doing a lot of mentoring my whole career. I got a lot of that kind of help early on in my career. As you could imagine, there weren't a lot of people who looked like me in tech 30 years ago. I had an amazing mentor at Dell who was actually the chief diversity officer. His name was Thurman Woodard. He helped me through some really tough times at Dell. And so Doug he looked at me and said, hey, I think you can have an influence on the whole company if you take this job. And it was a conundrum for me because you work so hard to, kind of move up and do more for your family, if we're honest about, our want for, more responsibility, more money, a bigger title. And now you ask me to take a job that's a whole lot smaller budget, a whole lot smaller staff, to argue with people about things they don't want to talk about anyway. And, but I, once I knew they really wanted me, I negotiated my way to get a little bit more, which, we all should do. Hey, they want me to do this, then let's talk about what it's worth. And I've been doing the job for 6 years. And when I remember when I came home and talked to my wife, um, she looked at me and she said, you know what, Ben? I've often heard you say, if you could do as well helping people every day as you've done working in tech, you'd spend your life helping people every day. And now you have the opportunity to do it. So stop whining about your big job and your big organization and take a shot. Like you asked me to take a shot when I left Austin, Texas to move to Bentonville, Arkansas. I never forget, she asked me, pull out the map and show me where Bentonville is. And I asked her, I said, give me 2 years. I said, and if you don't like it after 2 years, we'll find a larger city. And we've been here, almost 13. She told me, take the job for 2 years. And if you don't like it, I'm sure they'll let you move back to tech. And again, January will be 6 years in the gig. So 33 years as a technologist and 6 years in January doing the work that I'm doing today. It's the most rewarding, but sometimes the most challenging job I've ever had, Cody.
Yeah, I believe it. I mean, I started my career in tech, so I totally understand that shift. But it's fascinating that you've spent the majority of your life, adult career in tech, and now here you are leading inclusion and diversity for the world's largest company. What was the rationale in selecting a technologist to lead the D&I initiatives at Walmart?
So once I decided to take the job, I went back and asked that question. I was like, Doug, okay, what was the rationale? And I'm actually good friends with the lady who was head of HR at the time. We still stay in touch. And she said, Ben, the work you have been doing around mentoring across the organization, every gender and ethnicity and belief, we had our eye on it. We saw what you were doing. At one time, I had 10 or 15 mentoring circles. And she said, we just thought that you had credibility from a business standpoint and that you could figure out what needs to be done in the D&I space. What Doug said to me was pretty profound. He said, look, Ben, if traditional practitioners of D&I had it all figured out, we wouldn't 30 years plus later still be discussing and having the same issues we have today. So he said, Ben, I want you to take the problem, turn it upside down, look at it like a system, take a systems approach and use your technology background of understanding systems to look at this as a system and how do we address it systemically, because we need a systemic change. And so that's what he asked me to do. So looking back, and again, I'll be honest, when he said that to me, I was like, okay, I don't even know how I'm going to do that, but it sounded good, right? But that's exactly what we've done. We are trying to make systemic change across the life cycle of HR is really where we've been focused. Where do you recruit? Who do you hire? Who gets promoted? How are people compensated? What happens in calibration? And how do you actually address that system in a way that you look for where unconscious bias may be in the system and actually begin to root it out? We call it bias interrupters. How do you place bias interrupters in place along the life cycle of the HR processes? I believe that one of the most insidious places that unconscious bias lives in corporation is right in the HR processes. And our ability to begin to understand, number one, that we all have unconscious bias. Number two, it plays out in decisions we make about people. And number three, you don't have to react. Your first reaction to your unconscious bias should be to stop and pause and think and recognize, okay, are my biases playing out as I'm making these decisions along the life cycle? That's some of our approach and what we're trying to teach leaders. Because you can't eliminate unconscious bias. We all have them. Yeah. The neuroscientists say if you have an unconscious bias that gets a good result, it's a good unconscious bias. You have an unconscious bias that gets a bad result, it's a bad unconscious bias. but we can train leaders that they actually influence and affect decisions they make about people.